Hi everyone, happy Monday. Thanks to Angie for the video on special education and the background information on what we need to do to make sure that we are properly evaluating those students who really need it the most. This will hopefully provide a little more information about some of the other pieces regarding students who are in need of intervention that you might be wondering about. So hopefully you read the email that I sent out following our C4K training, but I really want you to understand that the state of Iowa and the legislators for the state of Iowa truly weren't on the same wavelength when they decided to roll out this entire process. Nevertheless, we are required by law to provide interventions for those students not proficient on the FAST assessment for A reading. So again, we're in that situation, and while the C4K team didn't ever intend for us to be providing interventions for almost our entire class in some cases, that is what's happening, and so it's our hope to provide you some support. At the same time, we want you to better understand the processes that we need to provide to support students, because both Angie and I know that you are working so hard on behalf of all the kids in your classroom and all the kids that you support. With this, we realize also that it's a little bit high stakes when we're taking the FAST A reading, the CBMR, we have Iowa assessments. We want to do well, and we want our kids to do the best that they can do. Definitely we feel the pressures of that, and we know that classroom teachers and resource teachers, specialists, Title I teachers, we know that everybody feels the pressures of this. We want our kids to show how much that they know and how well they're able to do. At the same time, the reality is that we aren't there. We don't have 80% of our students proficient on the core. So with that, we don't want you to jump and think that we need to provide special education services or a 504 for all of the students who aren't proficient, because that's not really what this is about. We do want to support you. We know you're working the best that you can. We know that you're serving these students with every ounce of passion and energy that you have. We just really ask that you follow these processes so that we can make sure that we're still only identifying those students who truly do have a disability, and also providing the necessary supports to all students who aren't proficient. And this does include students for math as well as written language. The same processes would be in place for those students as well. So to start with, I wanted to take you back to the Iowa MTSS information. So MTSS, if you'll remember, is the same thing as RTI. Iowa renamed it a couple of years ago, and MTSS it means that it allows educators to judge the overall health of the educational system by examining data for all students, general and special education, as well as identifying students who need additional supports. And if you'll remember, MTSS stands for Multi-Tiered System of Supports. I'm sorry for my scrolling here, but I'm going to scroll down. We need to remember that Iowa's MTSS framework is made up of these 5 components. So evidence-based curriculum and instruction shall be provided at the universal level. Remember, universal is for all students. Universal screening shall be used 3 times per year. We're using the FAST, CBMR, and A reading 3 times per year for that. Evidence-based instructional interventions at the targeted and intensive levels shall be provided to each student who needs them. And that's spelled out in our legislation, where we have to provide interventions and conduct progress monitoring for any student falling in the red. And then progress monitoring data shall be collected and used to guide instruction. Again, that's something that has to be done weekly. And then data-based decision making. So what do we do when we look at that progress monitoring data? And we're going to get into that too, but probably not all today. So in order to be fully implementing this, which is an expectation of the state of Iowa, we have to be implementing all of these components. So you might be saying, well, that's fine and dandy, but how many kids are we talking about here? So I take us back to this pyramid, and I know we've shown this pyramid for a variety of different things, but really this is the pyramid that we look at when we look at the standard treatment protocol. And so when we look at the universal, they were talking about the universal level. That means 80 to 90% of our students are able to reach proficiency based on our evidence-based course. So based on receiving the Iowa core instruction, the standards that we're providing instruction on every day. We're monitoring this 3 times a year, and we're doing that through, in the area of literacy, we're measuring that through our FAST A reading and our FAST CBMR. And then, do I need additional data and or assessments? Rarely. So this is where we hope to get. We're obviously not there yet. This was the state's plan. The state, I think, initially thought that this is where, you know, we're not that far off from this. Well, once they started getting all of our FAST data in, they realized the state was not quite at this level. So this is our goal. The targeted, this is that group that we're really looking at. This should be only 5 to 10% of our population. So this universal level, 80 to 90% of the kids in your class should be in this universal level. Now, after we've taken the assessments, we can see that that's not where we're at. We've got a much higher percentage here. So as we continue our professional development this year, we'll be helping you to better support your students in your classroom by looking at class-wide interventions. We're not quite there yet, but that's where we hope to get to. But remember, targeted, we should only have 5 to 10%, and I know for a fact in some classrooms you have almost 60% of your students receiving interventions. That's not how this system was designed to be used, but that's the reality we're living in. So with targeted interventions, that should be they're receiving the universal level plus small group targeted evidence-based interventions. You're monitoring progress bi-weekly, and then sometimes we need to collect additional data. Intensive intervention, and when you look at targeted, that would be those small groups that you're pulling kids in. This is intensive. This is where we have so many of our kids falling, that level of red, where they've been deficient twice. They're substantially deficient in those literacy screeners, and they're receiving the core plus individualized intensive evidence-based interventions and this targeted level. We are monitoring their progress weekly, and we usually do need to collect additional data and assessments to monitor this. When we think about the number of students that require services in special education, or this number of students who perhaps might have a learning disability, this pyramid could be looked at in that same respect. We should have 80 to 90% of our students that are not even being considered for that. We have another group that they will require interventions. They could be low-level learners that just require learning taught in a different way. And then 1 to 5% of our students should be those students who possibly do need special education services. They need specially designed instruction to meet their needs. But I just wanted to remind everybody of this pyramid. This isn't the current state of our pyramid. I'm not really even sure what our pyramid would look like, but I'm thinking the green would be a lot less, the yellow would be a lot bigger, and the red would be a lot bigger. And that's not how we want it. This is how we want it. To get out of there. So with regards to MTSS, the Iowa tier is in place, and with that, I know that a lot of you are feeling really comfortable and confident providing those interventions. Remember, we're only allowed to provide interventions for those specific, we're only allowed to provide the interventions that were approved by the state of Iowa and the clearinghouse. And so we have lots of supports going on in place. The district has said that our drop-dead date for making sure all students are having weekly progress monitoring if they're in the red, because the state is also monitoring this, is by the end of this week, getting going into next week. We have to have all students in on this. And I know that I nor Angie has had time to really directly support teachers. I ask that if you do not have your students currently entered to receive interventions and set up for progress monitoring, that you please contact one of the consulting teachers to help you with this. It's very, very important. It's critical because the district and the state are monitoring this. There is a website available if you're one of these teachers who just says, you know, I just need some extra help. I need to get going. I'm going to send this link out. This is actually from the Prairie Lakes AEA. They are an AEA within the state of Iowa, and they have a lot of step-by-step directions for how to set up intervention and progress monitoring for students. So I will send these links out to you as well, but I think you might find them helpful. I don't want this video to be too long. I also wanted to briefly touch on 504. Some of you have said, well, what if my student doesn't qualify as having a learning disability, but I still think that they're really low? Could they qualify for a 504? Well, I wanted to make sure that you understand what a 504 means. Section 504 is a federal law that protects students with disabilities from being discriminated against at school. It requires the school to give your child the same opportunities as students without disabilities who go to school. The school does this through a reasonable accommodation or modification. A reasonable accommodation includes such things like physical modifications to the school that are necessary for the child to enjoy full use of the school building. It could include a change in rules, policies, procedures when it's needed to allow the child to use or enjoy school, including extracurricular activities to the same extent as students who do not have disabilities. So this could mean allowing a child with diabetes to have a snack in the classroom. It could be allowing a child with ADHD to stand up when needed during class. I want to emphasize Section 504 is not about getting special education services for a child. 504s do not provide any specially designed instruction. It doesn't allow for any of that. This would not be an appropriate recommendation to a family who is desperate to help their child. It's really important that when you're talking with parents about ways that you can support a child, that you're telling them about the interventions that we have in place, because it is very likely that they're concerned about their child because they're receiving information that their child isn't meeting our expected definition of proficient, but at the same time, they aren't students who will qualify with a learning disability. A student may be eligible for a 504 plan if that student has a diagnosis or a disability. This includes any physical or mental impairment generally recognized by the community of physicians or psychologists. The impairment must substantially limit one or more of their major life activities in a way that requires the provision of accommodations or services in the school setting. This is clearly spelled out in Section 504. There are lists of disabilities and impairments that are spelled out, and some possible help for accommodations. And we do have students in our buildings that do have 504s, and we want to continue to support them with this, but it's not appropriate for all students, and it's especially not necessarily appropriate for students that are low-level learners, that are not learning at the rate of their peers. So with that, I really just wanted to touch base on that. You are working very hard. Please do not get frustrated. Please do not jump to, I have a whole class of students who need to be tested for special education services. That's not the answer in this. At the same time, we do know that we have students who are struggling that we've been monitoring for a couple of years. And whether they're at Crescent Park or Lincoln, and Amy Gilbert has given me a list of kids and I've been monitoring their data. And at Clark too, I have lists of kids that I've been watching, some of them since TK. They are all kids that we're not going to let slip through the cracks, but we're monitoring their progress, their rate of learning. I hope this helps, and thanks for listening.